Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com. and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's show, host Casey Hentges and wildlife ecologist Dwayne Elmore look at sapsucker damage in trees and woody shrubs. Extension Associate Charles Luper talks with us about organic and inorganic pesticides in the garden. Casey creates a lovely yet simple arrangement from succulents. And Barbara Brown prepares an asparagus and hard-cooked egg salad.
You've probably seen those succulent dish gardens available for sale, and today we're going to show you how easy it is to make one yourself. They make great centerpieces for tables and great decorations for your outdoor patio, and they're pretty simple to put together. What you're going to need is some sort of container and then also some succulent plant material, obviously. Now here we've got one that's a very low profile one, which is nice. Succulents don't need a lot of root space, and so this is very shallow, but also gives you a wide surface area to plant several different succulents in it. The other thing you might want to think about is if you are looking for a centerpiece, you do want it to be a little bit shorter in profile so as to not obstruct your view from those that are sitting around you at the table. If you want to go with something that looks more like a fish bowl, the important thing to keep in mind is to make sure that it has a wide enough mouth that you can get your hand in there to plant the plants, as well as actually putting the plants in there also. Now we have some succulents here that we're going to use, and ours are little plugs. You can see that they're fairly small little plugs, but we've got quite an array of plants to choose from. We've got some hens and chicks, and then also some sedums. Now these are all hardy succulents, and there's something to keep in mind about succulents. Succulents have a kind of a thicker, coarser leaf, and that allows them to be more drought tolerant because they actually hold more moisture inside of the plant. They also have a waxier leaf, and that prevents them from losing as much moisture out of their leaves as some of your other plants. Now don't confuse succulents with cactus because they are different. Now all cactus are succulents, but not all succulents are cactus. Here we have a few other succulents, and these are tropical succulents. So we can plant these together, but we'll need to make sure our tropical ones, we do bring those in the winter time. To start out, we're going to get our container. So we're going to use this fishbowl one here, and we're going to fill it halfway with potting soil. Now you can see the potting soil that we're using is not your traditional potting soil that you might use for bedding plants. This has a lot more aggregate in it. It's very coarse. It's got some sand, it's got some chunks of clay in here, as well as just some grit. It does have our fertilizer already mixed in, and then you can see some vermiculite added in there as well, in addition to some pine bark. And this will help keep the moisture in there, but also allow for plenty of drainage, because we don't want that moisture to stay tightly up against the root ball of our new plants. So we're going to fill this up. You of course always want to make sure that you, in whatever container you're doing, you're not using topsoil from the garden because it tends to hold way too much moisture in a container, especially for succulents. Now that we have our container about half filled with this potting media, we're going to select the plants that we want to use. And like I said, ours are plugs here because we're working with a smaller container. A lot of these do come in 2-inch or 4-inch containers that might be more ideal, especially if you're planting a larger container. Now, this is when you have to tap into your inner artist and you get to choose, you know, different things that you want to look for. If you wanted to go with kind of an all burgundy color, you could choose all the burgundy ones. If you wanted to go with something that has a similar texture and pattern, you could maybe use all the different various hens and chicks in this. Or if you wanted to go with something taller, you could put one of these taller ones in the center. So you can kind of play with it. I'm going to try with some of these different burgundy ones. Now, an important thing to keep in mind whenever you're pulling something out of a container that it's been growing in, you want to make sure to kind of tease those roots a little bit because they tend to get a little tangled up and bound up in there. And you can see how tightly bound these little plugs are. So we're just going to pull the bottoms off of them. And what that will do is allow those roots to start growing out into their surrounding space. So we're going to play a little bit with this. Now, because we're dealing with a more aggregate potting mix, it can be a little difficult to dig a hole for these because the gravel kind of wants to fall back in on itself. So I tend to just set them on the gravel and then we'll come back in with more soil and plant around it. So we're just going to add a little soil around each of these, trying not to bury the plant, but we do want to make sure that we're burying the root ball. Sometimes a kitchen spoon or a plastic spoon comes in handy to maneuver that soil around those root balls. You don't want to plant these too close to the side of the container. You want to make sure they have a couple of inches between each one of them so that they'll have room to grow. So we're going to tuck those in a little bit with some more soil. You just kind of want to rotate your container to make sure that you can see there's a little bit that's still exposed. You want to make sure to try to get as much of that soil off the leaves as possible. And now that we have it planted, we're just going to water it in. When we water, we want to make sure that we're getting the root ball nice and moist, especially because these are plugs. They're going to be more vulnerable to drying out than a larger pot might have been. Now, it doesn't need a lot of moisture because these are succulents. One of the nice things about a glass container is that you will be able to see how much moisture, and if you're seeing the water line in here, then you've definitely added too much moisture to this. They don't need a lot of moisture. But you will eventually start to see the roots grow through that aggregate, and that'll kind of be interesting to see the root part of a plant that we typically don't get to see. Now, the difference between this succulent glass dish and a traditional terrarium is that a traditional terrarium would have a lid to it because usually you have ferns and things like that in there and you want that condensation and that moisture to build up. Like I said, succulents don't necessarily want a lot of moisture on their leaves, and so when we water this, we use a nice stream of water versus a spray bottle that you might think you would use in a terrarium. We want to make sure the water's getting to the roots, not just on top of the plant. Again, because this is glass, it does not have drainage holes. So if you're somebody who's a little bit finicky about watering the correct amount, you might get a container that does have holes to allow for that drainage. And of course, if you're going to put it on your table, you want to make sure to put a saucer underneath it. Here we've used a mix of both hardy and tropical succulents, and they're going to grow just fine all summer long together, but come fall we're going to need to decide what we want to do with this. The hardy succulents, we can actually plant those out in our garden if we wanted to, and they would continue to grow for us in our garden throughout the season. And the tropical one, we're going to need to bring that in. So we could, if we wanted to, just leave it all together and bring the whole thing in the winter time, and the hardy ones would be fine as well, or we could plant them in our garden. The nice thing about planting hardy succulents out in your garden is if you decide to do this project, instead of buying plant material, you can actually just go out into your garden and dig up some of those succulents. It's a great way to feature those garden plants in a unique way. Succulent dish gardens are an easy, fun project. In addition, they make a nice, elegant, last-minute gift for anyone, for any occasion. We are back with Dr. Dwayne Elmore, who is our Extension Specialist for Natural Resource Ecology and Management. And today we're going to talk about a pattern that we often see on some of our soft trees. What is it that's making this?
Yeah, yellow-bellied sapsucker is actually the woodpecker that's causing damage.
Okay, and so they have a few species of plants that they prefer.
Yeah, generally it's trees that produce a lot of sap when they're injured, so pines, maples, fruit trees, and viburnums.
Okay, and what's the telltale sign of that pattern that makes us think that it would be a yellow-belly sapsucker?
It's really regular. Sometimes it'll be small circular holes in a distinct pattern,
okay.
Horizontal or vertical, and it's shallow. It's usually, they're just penetrating into the inner bark, into the cambium. They're not actually creating cavities.
Okay, and we have some right here behind us on this viburnum actually, which a lot of times we think of them on trees. That's a little bit more common, but we have identified, and this is fresh damage.
Yes.
So what is the season for these yellow-belly sapsuckers?
So they're migratory, and they usually come in October and depart in March or April. So it's pretty much just a winter issue, and typically it's late winter, early spring when people are out starting to work in their garden that they notice the damage that's accumulated all winter.
Okay, so like us here, we're seeing this now. What can we do about it? Is there anything we can do about it?
There's not a whole lot you can do to prevent this. The birds are protected as a migratory bird, so you can't legally kill them. Fortunately, it's very unusual that this damage actually causes mortality to a tree.
Okay, but on something small, it can kind of girdle some of these smaller branches, but it's not going to kill the overall plant.
Correct.
Okay, so this is just a case where we've got a nice garden and we've got to appreciate the wildlife that comes with it.
Right.
All right, well, thank you for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Today joining us is Charles Luper, and he is an Extension Associate for the Pesticide Safety Education Program. And Charles, we're always talking about both organic and, you know, your typical traditional pesticides, but first let's start off, what is a pesticide?
Okay, a pesticide is defined under federal or state law as any substance that mitigates, repels, or takes care of a pest. So pests can be a lot of different things. Most people will think insects or weeds, but it could also be fungi, bacteria, viruses, a lot of other things. So that kind of takes us where we're going with typical pesticides on those.
So do you have some examples of what you're talking
Yeah,
about
I think
here?
most people are familiar with pesticides. They're going to think of your insecticides like, you know, Raid, herbicides like the Weed Begons or the Spectricides. Even probably maybe one that people don't think about is your pet collars or your flea and tick drops. Those are insecticides that ward off the flea and tick from your pet, but are what we consider a traditional pesticide. Also, that surprises a lot of homeowners or people that don't realize, even a lot of applicators don't realize that under pesticide law we have the cleaners, or what we call antimicrobials. So pesticide is the broad general term, covers everything, and then your individual things like an insecticide will take care of insects, and fungicides, fungi, you have all the specific types out there.
Okay, excellent. So now when we're talking about pesticides, we have our traditional ones that are synthetic. Can you kind of elaborate on those?
Yeah, we have what I call traditional or synthetic, man-made or synthesized from things like these here. We also get into nowadays, people are trying to hit the market, meet different needs of different consumers out there. Of course, organic has become very popular nowadays. These are all registered pesticides with the Environmental Protection Agency, but of course, organic producers only use a pesticide at the very last option. They're going to do other things, integrated pest management, sanitation, those, but sometimes they still have to use a pesticide to produce. So they're looking for something that fits in, that their certifying agency would allow. And so we're talking stuff like insecticidal soaps, diatomaceous earth, those kind of products. What you want to look for if you're more into organic is on those, a lot of them will have this OMRI, or Organic Material Research Institute. They're going to certify their products that put their seal on, say that can be used for organic production if it needs to be at that point, and you would still be able to be certified organic. Or for a consumer at home, they know with that seal they're getting products that have been approved for organic
And
use.
for people that are interested in that, they can go to their website and actually find a list of products that are OMRI approved.
Yeah, they do have a list. It's pretty in-depth, but they do have a website that lists products that are OMRI listed, that are out there that meet those companies have gotten OMRI listed on there. So they don't list everything, but if they're listing it there, they're working to meet organic standards.
Okay, so our organic pesticides, as well as our traditional synthetic pesticides, all have an EPA pesticide number with them. Are there any that maybe don't have an EPA number, and what does that mean, whether it has a number or not?
There's newer products out there. Some we call them they're natural products. There is a section that allows for producers to make pesticides out of natural ingredients. That if they meet the standards of the actual active ingredient and the mixture of it can be exempt from registration with the Environmental Protection Agency. So these products here, a lot of times they're oils like sesame oil, canola oil, citric acid. That one has egg white solids. It's a repellent. They're less harmful towards, less risky for people to use. So they've decided those don't have to be registered with EPA, but they're still classified as pesticides. And in the state of Oklahoma, those still have to be registered with our Oklahoma Department of Agriculture as a pesticide in the state of Oklahoma to be sold.
So regardless of what type of pesticide we're using, though, we need to treat them all with a certain respect. And can you go into how we should be handling it?
You'll hear us say that the label is the law, so you want to make sure you're putting it on where the label says to. Don't go off label. That's just causing things to happen. So whether we're using these products here or these here, we kind of have some guidelines, especially for homeowners. The labels aren't as clear as maybe say a farmer's label, where they really tell them what kind of gloves or personal protective equipment to wear. We suggest homeowners wear definitely long pants, shoes and socks is always best. The goal is to keep the stuff on.
Closed-toed shoes, not sandals,
yeah,
right?
no flip-flops,
Okay.
sandals, shorts, those kind of things. The goal is to keep the things off of you. That is just protecting you. It's a safety factor thing. So definitely, that wear. Rubber boots or some kind of non-porous shoe wear is even better if you're spraying your lawn, so those don't get wet if people want to. But definitely, just your normal, clothing like that. The biggest thing we talk about with homeowners is wearing a rubber glove. No cotton or leather gloves. Those can absorb pesticides. So we want you to wear a rubber glove. We're big fans of these nitrile disposable. You can get a box like this, or they come in packs of 10. That's a box of 100. All your home garden stores, big box stores of that have these in the paint department, automotive department anymore. Disposable, you can wear these, put them on. Nitrile rubber is pretty chemical resistant. These supposedly are one size fits all, which we kind of tried them out. They definitely, unless you have just a really big hand, you can get by with those. You're done at the end of the day, you take them off, throw them away. You don't have to worry about those. There's also these reusable gloves. You can find those. That's nitrile rubber. I call them, equate them to kind of like a dishwashing glove. You want something you can reuse. You want to wash those off after you're done. They're a little more sturdier.
Longer, yeah.
With that, but those also can be found. But we're a big fan of these. These are easy to find. You're done, you throw them away. You're protecting yourself.
And I know a lot of times people might have latex allergies, so they're going to these
that's
too.
another thing, good point. Used to, you'd see a lot of the latex. We don't recommend. One, these are a little bit more chemical resistant, and then two, you don't have to worry about latex allergy. Storage, we want to make sure we store these no matter what the product, in proper places, away from feed, fertilizer in case you have a spill. Definitely out of the reach of children, no matter what the product is. They pretty much all say keep it out of the reach of children. You don't want kids messing around with those.
And pets.
Pets, definitely, if something spills, you don't want, you know, the dog licking up these materials if there's a spill. A good thing we do is when we store, we definitely will have people tell you, we like the little Rubbermaid containers. So if I have these in my garden or shed or my garage, if one of these does leak, it's going to leak in this. It contains it. It keeps it from off of my shelves, my floor. And, you know, really depending on how many products you could still even use it up, get rid of it that way. But mainly to contain things, it's just a little cheap, easy way of protecting your areas storage-wise. We want to make sure you keep things in the bottles with the labels so we know what they are. Those instructions are going to be on there, and so we don't get them mixed up with something else.
Well, thank you for clearing this up and giving us all this information about pesticides. And again, for homeowners, remember, the label is the law.
Today we're doing asparagus and hard-cooked egg salad. So I've got different stages here. The hard-cooked egg is already done, so that part we're not going to do. But this salad can be done a couple of ways. You can either eat the asparagus raw, or you can blanch the asparagus. So what I have here is what happens and why you might want to choose one over the other. This is still raw, very flavorful, very nice way to eat it. This you can see if we put them side by side. You may be able to see that this one is brighter. The advantage to the quick blanch, and it's like a 30-second submerged in water is all it is. It's very, very quick, and then if you really want to stop the cooking, you submerge it in ice water for at least the same length of time. But the other advantage is that this asparagus is going to be much cleaner. Not only will any residual dirt or dust that didn't come off when you washed it be taken off, but also it's going to take care of some microbial activity that is going to be ongoing as well. So from that standpoint, the blanched one may be a little bit better reason for you to choose that one. Also, it's a little bit softer, not much because it didn't go very long. So anybody who has some issues with that will find that one a better choice too. So there's nice reasons for doing it. Either way will work. If you have more time, you might do the blanch. You might also take it out and grill it if you've got time on the weekend and you're doing some grilling, and you might as well throw a few extra asparagus spears on there. This takes about 5, depends on the size. I've got 5 of them in here. All right, we're going to make a dressing for this as well. So for that, I've got 1½ teaspoons of balsamic vinegar, a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice, a tablespoon of parsley that's fairly finely chopped. You don't have to go too far overboard. A teaspoon and a half of honey. And then the last thing that's going in here is a very small amount, just a teaspoon of olive oil. Now, you might think that that's not very much to make a dressing with, but we've got a few other ingredients here that are going to add some fat to it. We've got some feta cheese, so, and we have an egg also, so that's going to be enough. Thing that I first tried on this that I'll tell you right offhand you may or may not want to try is I tried doing this in a jar and shaking it, but the honey is somewhat difficult to work with that way. It all just sat down there at the bottom, and you either have to shake a lot more than I did or choose a whisk. All right, going to take our asparagus spears. I've got 2 cups of leaf lettuce here. This is one serving, so that's all we're going to need. Going to spread our asparagus spears, and I cut them on an angle just because they look prettier. And then over the top of that, we're going to drizzle our lettuce, or our dressing. And then we're going to put a little bit of feta cheese over top of that. It's just about a tablespoon of crumbled feta. And again, that's going to add some of that richness to it, so we don't need much oil in the dressing. And then I've got a hard-cooked egg. I'm just going to kind of nest it in here. You can do it all in one spot. You can do it in the corners, however it works for you. And then last, depending on how much you want, since this is serving for one, this is you get to decide, a little bit of kosher salt. And you can add more when you're actually tasting it, and a little bit of black pepper. And that's all there is to this one. It goes together really, really fast. It is massively flavorful because you're using that fresh asparagus, new season, warm season coming up in ahead that gives you all full of anticipation. So I hope you'll try this one, is asparagus and hard-cooked egg salad. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, we travel to Edgemere Park in Oklahoma City to hear about an exciting survey of all of the trees in all of the parks in Oklahoma City. Then we head to Tulsa to the Food Bank of Eastern Oklahoma, where they are battling food insecurities in the eastern part of the state. And back in Stillwater, we have some fun projects to tackle in the garden. Spring is in full swing, so be sure and join us again next week for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.